Good morning, y'all. Y'all have a mess of kids here. Is that not good? That's great. And is it Bob? Where's Bob? Where's Bob? You passed through our fire district. This morning, I would like to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and that is preparation. Whether it's in the fire service, whether it's taking care of our bodies, I believe it is important to prepare. Would you agree? Well, this morning I'd like to talk about, if I can get this to work. Okay. So how many of y'all, I asked this last night, I ask this everywhere I go. How many of y'all are originally from this county? Wow, that's pretty good, yeah. How many of y'all are from Western North Carolina? North Carolina? How about the South? Okay, good. Y'all will understand me. This one right here? Perfect. Thank you. So this morning I'd like to talk about preparing the brain for battle. Now, as I mentioned, preparation is important. Does anybody work in the fire service? Okay. So you know the importance of fire prevention. When I started firefighting in 1980, we had many more house fires, structure fires, residential structure fires than we do today. And according to the United States Fire Administration, there's two major reasons. One is because of fire codes changing in the standpoint of electrical, and the other is this, where we go into the school system every year in what month? October, exactly, October. Why? That's when Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lamp and burned down Chicago, the Great Chicago Fire. And we go into the school system and we teach children fire prevention. And what we teach them in just that short period of time every year makes a difference when they become adults and they start applying those. And because of that, according to the United States Fire Administration, we have less home fires today. We teach them to, well, now it used to be stop, drop, and roll, but children, the Tennessee Fire Marshal is asking that it's cover your face, stop, drop, and roll. And the other thing is if you're not on fire and the house is on fire, don't stop, drop, and roll. Get out of the house. Because we had kids stop, drop, and roll in the house fire and they weren't on fire and that was wasting time. So that's from the Tennessee Fire Marshal. And so as we go in there, we go out and we play with them, we spray water to just develop a relationship. But the biggest issue here is prevention. I actually came up on this wreck. I saw this wreck occur. And if you get off the fire truck and you need to rip this car open, is it time to grab out the owner's manual of the Jaws of Life and say, how do you use this thing? No, you need to know how to use it. So you can get out there, rip that car apart, and then take care of that patient. This is a situation, a little girl from Asheville. She just got her driver's license. She leaves Asheville heading westbound on I-40. Daddy, can I drive? No, it's too dangerous on the interstate. You can't drive on the interstate yet. You're not ready. So they go across the state line into Tennessee, right where you passed Waterville. You walked across there. They got off at that exit, and they come around. They get on Waterville Road, right about where you came off the hill. You went then across the bridge, and then you went back up. You remember that. Well, they swap. Okay, you can drive. Mama gets in the back seat. Daddy gets over onto the front passenger seat. Little girl gets in the car, driver's seat. And here she goes down Waterville Road. It's very narrow. And she goes along. She's driving along. It's not very long. And front right tire falls off the road. So she stomps the gas, jerks it to the left, and pew, into the Pigeon River, which the Pigeon River is the most rafted river in the United States. Did y'all know that? It was right at 4th of July, this time of year. I was actually on the interstate putting up fireworks signs when the call came out, and get there, but guess what? We hadn't been trained in swift water yet. Fire hadn't been trained. Law enforcement hadn't been trained. And so we just stood there kind of helping with ropes as these raft guides help with, that's the car. Now, continuous quality improvement. We now have a very, very good swiftwater rescue team. My son is on it. And we're now prepared to address this kind of situation very rapidly because we're now prepared. You got a structure fire. Officer just ran around, did a 360. What is a 360 important? Absolutely, it's important. Is a child hanging out the top story of the backside? Is there a propane tank back there? Is there another structure back there? So we go around it. But would y'all be ready to go fight this house fire? You got to be prepared. You got to be able to know what you're doing, and then you can go and put that out. Would you be afraid to fight this fire? Why? You're trained. Is it simple? This is a simple fire. How to prepare the brain for battle. First, we have to talk about the fuel. You talked about the fuel. We got to talk about the fuel. Anybody have an idea how expensive this car is? How much? $2 million. Let's try $8.5 million. Do you think they're worried about the fuel? Absolutely. Well, Elizabeth and I are on the right page. How about this car? Kids, she talked about the Bugatti. This is the Bugatti. That's a highfalutin car. How much would this car cost? $5.9 million. Let's try $18.9 million. And as Miss Elizabeth said, do you think you're going to worry about the fuel that you put in that car? Absolutely you would. Well, what about this car? I'm just an old country boy. Now that Bugatti has 1,400, it's a 1,479 horsepower. 1,479 horsepower. Well, that's a lot. Well, let's look at this little car here. Just a little old country car in Newport, Tennessee. He's one of the guys that comes in and sees me. He bought that Hellcat, and it had only 800 and some horsepower in it. The guy's 70-some years old, and it's not fast enough. 800 and some horsepower. And in his first tank, he got 2-point-something miles to the gallon. It doesn't even kick into speed until 500 miles, so the computer says it to kick in. But at 300 miles, he decides, this car just ain't fast enough. So he sends it to Level Cross, North Carolina. Who lives in Level Cross? Who? Mr. Petty. That's right outside of Randleman. Mr. Petty, the guy with the cowboy hat. He sends it to Mr. Petty. Mr. Petty cranks it up a little bit, actually more than the Bugatti, 1,500 horsepower. Mr. Petty said, it's no longer miles per gallon, it's miles per tank. And this car is 115 octane. He says, you have to go to the airport now and get your fuel, because if you put fuel from the gas station, it will destroy this engine. He went and totally rebuilt the thing and put a new fuel line on it. The fuel lines, he put 2 fuel lines on it, 2 fuel pumps, and the fuel lines are 3/4 of an inch in diameter. He has to be careful what fuel he puts in there. So I don't know where you got the Bugatti manual. I looked for it and I couldn't find it. So I found this one. So let's look at the S-Class Cabriolet. What does it say about fuel? And so here's a picture of the owner's manual. Note, damage caused by the wrong fuel. Even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage of the fuel system, the engine, and the emissions control system. Never refuel using diesel, more than 10% ethanol, more than 3% methanol, additives containing metal. If you accidentally refuel with the wrong fuel, do not switch the engine on, according to Mercedes. But this is what gets me. Even small amounts of the wrong fuel could result in damage to the fuel system and the engine. The repair costs are high. Can you think of a correlation? Can anybody tell me what the most important organ in the body is? The brain. A lot of people say it's the heart. Some people say the digestive system. But why is the brain the most important organ in the body? Controls the whole system. Anything else? What? It can't be replaced. Let's talk a little higher here. It's how we communicate with God. If you put 93 octane in that car, it's just not going to work too good. If we put Twinkies in the brain, it ain't going to talk too well. See, when you eat a Twinkie, it goes in the blood. Now you have Twinkie blood. And when you have Twinkie blood, you're going to have a Twinkie brain. And Twinkie brains cannot discern the Word of God very well. The brain is the organ and instrument of the mind and controls the whole body. In order for the other parts of the system to be healthy, the brain must be healthy. In order for the brain to be healthy, the blood must be pure. If by correct habits of eating and drinking, the blood is kept pure, the brain will be properly nourished. This is the physiology. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Now, you and I know the chicken comes first, but I couldn't, what comes first? The digestive system, the brain? This is very clear. Before you treat the body, you must treat the brain. And you treat the brain by making sure you have good blood. And how do you have good blood? It's what you eat and what you drink. Yes, the other laws affect the blood, but that's the physiology. It's the owner's manual. That Bugatti manual that you read, do you get a Pinto manual and read that to figure out how to fix that Bugatti? No. This is the owner's manual. And as she read, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. And you know what? Would it have been totally encompassing if God had just said, do all to the glory of God? That would have covered everything. But why did he say whether therefore you eat or drink? Because he loves us. He wants to help us. Who has children? Do you want to make them fail? Who has grandchildren? Do you want to make them fail? No. God loves us, and he says, let me help you here. Eating, what you eat and what you drink is very important. It kind of reminds me of there's a commandment that says, remember, because people would forget it. Think about it. Now, I'm going to be reading from Harvard a lot this morning, some from Mayo, some from Psychology Today, but I'm going to be reading from some universities on physiology. Think about it. Your brain's always on. It takes care of your thoughts and movements, your breathing, your heartbeat, your senses. It works hard 24/7, even while you're asleep. This means your brain requires a constant supply of fuel. That fuel comes from the food you eat, and what's in that fuel makes all the difference. Put simply, what you eat directly affects the structure and function of your brain and ultimately your mood. Now that we're talking about preparing the brain for battle, what are we talking about there? What battle are we talking about? Spiritual battle. Is there a spiritual battle going on right now? Is there going to be a spiritual battle that's even tougher to come? What does Daniel 12:1 say? There's going to be a time as never before. This morning we were talking about the genocide in Rwanda. And I had an opportunity to go to the Genocide Museum. The conference president told me, he said, all 8 of my children and my wife were slaughtered by machete. How would you handle that? You ready for that? And the things that I learned in the museum, I cannot speak today because we have children. It was crazy what one human being does to the other human being. The Hutus decided the Tutsis, which they called cockroaches, should not live anymore. And so the media, like our CNN, comes out finally one day and says, kill the cockroaches. And it was on. The machetes had been funded by France, and they started just killing everybody by machete. It was brutal, and I cannot go into how brutal it was. It's going to be worse than that. It's going to be worse than the time of Holocaust, because Daniel says, when Michael stands up, it's going to be as a time of never before. Is your brain ready? And that's what we're talking about, how to prepare the brain for battle. Like an expensive car, your brain functions best when it gets only premium fuel, eating high quality of foods that contain lots of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, nourishes the brain and protects it from oxidative stress. The waste, the free radicals produced when the body uses oxygen, which can damage cells. Unfortunately, just like an expensive car, your brain can be damaged if you ingest anything other than premium fuel. If substances from low premium fuel, such as what you get from processed or refined foods, gets into the brain, listen to this. This is pretty cool. When you eat that Twinkie, when you eat that donut, when you eat that Oreo from your Oreo tree, it has little ability to get rid of it. Isn't that interesting? This is Harvard, not just the little community college across the street. Diets high in refined sugars, for example, are harmful to the brain. In addition to worsening your body's regulation of insulin, they also promote inflammation and oxidative stress. Multiple studies have found a correlation between a diet high in refined sugars and impaired brain function. What are you feeding your children? What are you feeding your grandkids? What are the kids who have those letters attached to their name now, what are they eating? Could it be the food that causes it? I go in the school system and I teach nutrition. I teach the 8 laws of health. And I ask the little kids, what happens when you eat sugar? And consistently over the years, they said, it makes you bounce off the walls. The kids know it. Are we setting them up to fail? Just like it's Saturday night, we go over to a friend's house, we don't get back to midnight, 1 o'clock, and we keep the kids up. Did we set them up to fail? It makes sense. If your brain is deprived of good quality nutrition, or if free radicals or damaging inflammatory cells are circulating within the brain's enclosed space, further contributing to brain tissue injury, consequences are to be what did Harvard say? It's expected. It's cause and effect. It's just that's just how it works. If you light a match to a bale of hay, it's expected it's going to catch on fire. What's interesting is that for many years, the medical field did not fully acknowledge the connection between mood and food, according to Harvard. Today, fortunately, the field of nutritional psychiatry is finding there are many consequences and correlations between not only what you eat, how you feel, and how you ultimately behave, but also the kinds of bacteria that live in your gut. And we could talk the whole weekend on gut biome. That's huge. Anybody ever ridden a steam train? Come over to Dollywood and you can ride a steam train. How well would that steam train run if you put toilet paper in there? Not too well. It's not going to climb that mountain. Did you know there's even differences in coal? Did you know that the West Virginia coal has more BTUs? I was recently up at our lifestyle center over in South Dakota, and they have coal in that area. And I was talking to a guy who's a supervisor over that coal region, and we were sitting in the airplane talking. And he said, your coal in West Virginia is much better for running trains than ours. Yours has much higher BTUs than ours does. So it's not just coal, it's got to be a coal that has high BTU. Much less putting toilet paper in there. Twinkies. What's the fuel? What's the best fuel for the brain? Did you know avocados are the top? Beets, blueberries, broccoli. We had blueberries for breakfast. Celery, green leafy vegetables, rosemary, turmeric, potatoes, asparagus, walnuts. Now, for the brain, English walnuts are the best. For the heart, with the PS ratio, black walnuts are better, but English walnuts are next. Let's talk about the second key, WHO and CDC. The WHO, World Health Organization, several years ago, a number of years ago, maybe 12, 15 years ago, came out and said, if every physician in the world would write a prescription for this medication, quote, medication, it would save at least 4 million lives a year. I believe it would save more. You know what that medication was the WHO was recommending? Exercise. I'm reading from Psychology Today. Anybody ever read Psychology Today? Here's what they said just 2 years ago. Neuroscientists around the globe agree that physical activity is the best medication to maintain brain health throughout one's lifespan. This is Psychology Today. Exercise improves the structure, function, and connectivity of your brain. There are many reasons that exercise is good for your brain. These include increases blood flow, which improves cerebrovascular health, the release of neurotropic factors like BDNF, which stimulate the growth of new neurons, and the benefits of glucose and lipid metabolism, which bring nourishment to the brain. Exercise is phenomenal on brain function. People who regularly perform aerobic exercise, running, jogging, brisk walking, swimming, cycling, and one of my favorite is rebounding, mini trampoline, have greater scores on neuropsychological function and performance tests that measure certain cognitive functions, such as attentional control, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility, working memory, declarative memory, spatial memory, and information processing speed. I remember years ago, I got my first notebook. And see, before we did budgets on those pieces of paper that are about this long, and we write them out by pencil. And it would take me 2 weeks of about 60 or more hours a week to write a budget for the year. Because see, in healthcare, everything is driven by cost per patient day or hours per patient day. And finally, you write your budget out and you take it to corporate and say, here's my budget. And always they said, I'd like a little more private pay here. I want a little more of this here. And I'd have to go back and rewrite that whole thing by hand. Well, it took a long time. And then Lotus comes out. Remember Lotus? We got a computer. I'm over in Durham. We're training in Hickory. But I remember the administrator from Durham is sitting beside me. And we're plugging our numbers in. We hit F7. It took maybe a minute to crunch that big old database. But in just 3-5 seconds, his was done. I thought, that's interesting. So we continue on, and we hit F7 again. Everybody's waiting. His is done. And I said, what did you do to your machine? Oh, nothing. I said, no, you did something to your machine. He says, well, yeah, I changed out the memory from 2 meg to 4 meg. Can you imagine that today, y'all? 2 meg to 4 meg? His processing speed was screaming at 4 meg. Exercise increases your information processing speed. Now, what are we talking about this morning? Why? What? Preparing for battle. Is that important? When Satan sets something in front of you, you need good information processing speed? You sure do. People who regularly perform aerobic exercise. Let's see here. I think I'm going the wrong way, am I? The transient effects of exercise on cognition include improvement in the most executive functions, such as attention, working memory, cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control, problem solving, and decision making. That's important in preparing the brain for battle. And information processing speed for a period of up to 2 hours after exercising. How many of y'all are still in school? Anybody still in school? Do you want to make good grades? So if you exercise, your processing speed increases for 2 hours. Do some exercise before your test. Drink a protein shake. That's amazing what that will do for your test results. The next one, adequate hydration. Our cells depend upon proper hydration to function optimally. The brain requires a delicate balance between water and various elements to operate. And when you lose too much water, that balance is disrupted. Your brain cells lose efficiency. Years of research have found that when people are parched, we have more difficulty keeping our attention focused. Dehydration can impair short-term memory function and the recall of long-term memory. Do we need to remember Bible verses? Do we need to remember experiences that we've had where God has taken care of us? And we can say, we can do this. He's done this before for me. Through Christ, I can do it now. The ability to perform mental arithmetic, like calculating whether or not you'll be late for work if you hit the snooze button for another 15 minutes, is compromised when your fluids are low, according to Psychology Today. The effect of dehydration on the brain function depends on the severity of dehydration. Psych Central says mild dehydration may adversely affect mood, energy levels, and the ability to concentrate. It could be our kids with those letters just hadn't drank enough. I had a guy come in not long ago, and he has diabetes, and I said, what do you drink? And he says, I said, do you drink water? No, I don't do water. I said, what do you drink? He says, I drink Mountain Dew. I said, well, how much do you drink? He says, 3 liters a day. Are our kids doing that? Could that affect their attention ability? Yes. Severe or prolonged dehydration may cause serious cognitive impairment, delirium, permanent brain damage, and Mayo Clinic said can even cause death. I enjoy looking at Mayo's research and lifestyle. My friend Denzel McNeilis not long ago, took me by their lifestyle research center there at Mayo. Very interesting research comes out of Mayo Clinic on lifestyle. A mere 2% drop in body water can trigger, according to Batman Jotty. Who's ever read Batman Jotty? Who's ever read Your Body's Many Cries for Water? Excellent book. You should have that in the church library. It can cause fuzzy short-term memory, trouble with basic math, and difficulty focusing on the computer screen or on a printed page. Batman Jotty continues, every function inside the body is regulated by and depends on water. I remember in nutrition, they taught me that water is the train car that carries your nutrients throughout the body. Water must be available to carry vital elements, oxygen, hormones, and chemical messengers to all parts of the body. Without sufficient water to wet all parts equally, some more remote, distal parts of the body will not receive the vital elements that water supplies. I have people come in, they say, Walt, I ain't got no energy. Have you got a pill? Well, tell me what fuel you're putting in it. Is that important? Are you putting in that 94 octane or are you putting in that 97 octane? Or in that Hellcat, the Petty rebuilt, are you putting in 115 octane? Does the food that you put in your mouth affect how well your brain works? It does. But also, are you dehydrated? You got to have water. It affects how well your brain works. Sunshine. Vitamin D boosts cognitive acceleration. In a study led by scientists at the University of Manchester in England, they looked at vitamin D levels and cognitive performance in more than 3,100 men aged 40 to 79 in 8 different countries across Europe. The data showed that those people with lower vitamin D levels exhibited slower cognitive processing speed. And people come in and I say, well, how's your vitamin D? I take X amount a day. I'm good. But what's the blood say? Oh, I take plenty. I had this lady come in. Well, let me back up. The last time I went to Rwanda, I took this black physician from Georgia, southern Georgia, Dr. Irvin Davis. Anybody know Dr. Davis? We went to Kigali together. And as we were teaching, and he was telling those physicians and those healthcare folks, he said, we have sunglasses on our skin. He says it takes 6 times more sun exposure than it does walk to get the same amount of vitamin D. This lady walks in. Her vitamin D level was 12. Now, when I got out of school, they told us, remember we talked about how things can change? Well, when I got out of school, they told us, oh, it's dangerous. Don't let it go above 32. Now they say 30 to 100 is good. Hers was 12. She's Caucasian. She works in landscaping all year long. That's her job. She takes 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day, and she has a vitamin D of 12. So I said, well, let's try doubling it. Let's go to 10,000 for 3 months. It was 17. So I call a buddy of mine in D.C. He does a lot with vitamin D, and I said, what do you think? He said, let's go 20,000 BID, 20,000 twice a day. Okay, let's do it. 3 months, it went to 24. Something's wrong here. And this has been several years ago, and he calls me just like within the week after it, and he says, Walt, did you hear that study that just came out today about magnesium and vitamin D? I said, yes, I heard it this morning. He said, you might want to try that. So went magnesium to bowel tolerance. She went to 97. See, it's not just how much vitamin D you take. There's other things. What is the blood level? You go to the doc and you say, what's your cholesterol level? Can you tell someone's cholesterol level by just looking at them? You got to look at the blood. There's a need for looking at the blood. And so as we look at different things in our blood, one of the big items that I look at is what's your vitamin D level? It's a number of things, but one thing, it can slow down your cognitive processing speed. Vitamin D deficiency is a current epidemic in our society, affecting 90% of the world's population. According to vitamin D expert Michael Holick, we estimate that vitamin D deficiency is the most common medical condition in the world. It is clear that most people are not getting enough sun exposure, healthy sun exposure. And that's the issue. People don't get out in the sun. There's times people go to work in the dark and they go home at the dark and they don't get any sunshine during the week. Vitamin D deficiency increases brain degenerative processes. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine showed that those who are classified as deficient in vitamin D were 42% more likely to have cognitive impairment. Meanwhile, those classified as severely deficient were 394% more likely to have cognitive impairment. It is not how much vitamin D you take a day. Know what your blood level is. Who knows Arvo Khanna? Anybody know Arvo? He's a neurologist, specializes in brain function, works a lot with dementia. Arvo wants your vitamin D at least 60 if you're his patient, though the lab may say 30 to 100. If you went to Dr. Ted Watkins in Washington, D.C. for immune system and bone density, he wants you 80 to 100. Serotonin, brain function. Serotonin is an important chemical and neurotransmitter in the human body. It is believed to help regulate mood and social behavior, appetite and digestion, sleep, memory, depression. How do you increase that serotonin? We talked about that last night, didn't we? You've got to eat your flaxseed that we had for breakfast, which has tryptophan. Then when you go outside, the sunshine comes through the eye, and you can't have sunglasses on. You can't have glasses that turn dark because that inhibits the ultraviolet, thank you, the ultraviolet from coming in, stimulating the pineal gland to convert the tryptophan into serotonin. You've got to have good serotonin, and you get that by eating that tryptophan, having that sun exposure. Serotonin deficiency symptoms: poor memory, low mood, difficulty sleeping. Well, difficulty sleeping because if you eat a big supper, if you don't go to bed when it gets dark, the pineal gland doesn't convert the serotonin into melatonin. Low self-esteem, anxiety. Do we see anxiety today? We see a lot of anxiety out there today. Aggression, temperance, making the right decisions. I used to think it was just all about alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. I'm good. But is there more? Could it be the music you listen to could affect the brain? I was reading Ben Carson, and I enjoy learning from Ben Carson. He said, anything that has ever affected your five senses, your brain remembers, unless the brain is damaged in that area. Where was I just recently? I had some, someone gave me some okra. And I said, that tastes just like the okra my grandmother had in the summer, the latter part of the summer in 1971 on her back porch. Boom, just like that. Isn't it amazing what the brain can do? The music that you listen to, that subliminal teaching that it does. There's some garbage out there, y'all, that your children could be listening to, your grandchildren could be listening to, that you could be listening to. How about TV? Can that affect brain function? Can that dull your senses? How about gaming? Several years ago, I was flying from East Coast out to the West Coast. I was probably flying from Atlanta out to the West Coast. And I was sitting there, and this guy was sitting one row up, sitting there on his Mac. He was in his mid-40s, and you would have thought he was an 8-year-old. He was gaming, and he was bouncing up and down and having so much fun. He was blowing people up, cutting their throats, shooting them, playing war. People who do that, can it mess with their reality? Someone does road rage, and they forget that they're not gaming? Social media, is that a problem? Do you see what Sally's husband got her? Why can't you get that from me? Did you see the vacation that Judy just went on? Why can't we ever have that? There's all kinds of meanness and bullying and things. You got to be careful. Control what goes into that mind. Again, Carson said, whatever goes in there, your brain remembers it. As we grow old and develop, very specific chemical reactions activate and deactivate parts of our genome and at strategic times and in specific locations, essentially turning our genes on and off. Epigenetics is a study of these processes and the factors that influence them. It's really cool. I like to learn about epigenetics. We could spend again all week on this. It's amazing what MIT is learning. But you know what? We were told that it's genetically predisposed, but you can change it, MIT found. If you eat right, if you get exercise, if you get sunshine, if you get water, if you get sleep, these basic laws of health, MIT is finding if you apply those, it can change your genes. And you don't have to be genetically predisposed on everything. Yes, there can be some issues, but it's like the story of salvation. If you accept Christ, can He change your heart? If you follow these laws of health, it can change your genes. It's cool. It is so cool. Let me go back up and read this last one. It is the law of the mind that it gradually adapts itself to the subjects upon which it is trained to dwell. What are you training your mind to dwell on? Is it gossip? Is it TV? I don't know, they still have General Hospital? Is that car going to do well on that air filter? Last night we talked about breathing like a chihuahua. Effects of air pollution on the brain. Children's psychological and motor development is negatively affected, negatively impacts the brain's white matter, which affects nerve conduction speed, brain inflammation, negatively affects executive functions such as planning and memory, cognitive impairment, increased behavioral problems. Maybe that's why people in the cities have all these crime problems. Maybe they need to move to the country where they don't have the pollution, where they don't have the propensity to these issues. Crime rates increase. This is NIH. Fresh air has many health benefits, improves the brain's ability to function, gives clarity to the mind, improves concentration, boosts learning abilities. Aren't you blessed to live here in the mountains? You are, you're blessed. Gives a sense of happiness and well-being by altering brain levels of serotonin, promotes quality of sleep. Rest. That's the hard one. Would you agree? When Mary Lou and I, 20 years ago, came back to East Tennessee, we mostly dealt with female hormones and stress. It's still an issue. But post-COVID, sleep deprivation is huge. Are you seeing a lot of issues in sleep deprivation? It's huge. And the thing is, it's not a cookie cutter. I mean, if you take Benadryl, it might put you to sleep. You take Benadryl, it may not. I mean, on the drug side, it may not work. The problem is you got to figure out which one. And then for some people, it's like deodorant. Have you ever seen people who put on deodorant and then it worked for a couple months and they have to change because it quits working? Well, the same thing's true here. They may start off with one thing to help them fall asleep, but then it quits working. A sleepy person's brain works harder and accomplishes less. A sleepy person's brain works harder and accomplishes less. University of California, San Diego. A single night of poor sleep is linked to less efficient filtering, meaning one's brain has issues picking out important or relevant nuggets of information from all the insufficient junk one's senses absorb. Mayo Clinic finds the following on sleep and brain function. Getting at least 7 hours of quality rest each night is essential for optimal health. And just 2 years ago, June of 2022, the American Heart Association added an 8th item on there, sleep deprivation. They said just 2 nights a week, getting less than 7 hours of sleep can affect cardio issues, blood pressure. Sleep provides the foundation for all daily habits and decisions. Let's say my phone dies, which it often does. But let's say my phone dies. Do I charge it tonight so I can use it today? I charged it last night so I can use it today. When does the day start? Pardon? When the sun goes down. Genesis 1 tells us that. What is the first major event in lifestyle that we do when the day starts? We sleep. It prepares us for that next day. Sleep provides the foundation for all daily habits and decisions. Have you ever just been plumb tired and you can't think? Have you ever been plumb tired and you're ill as a striped snake? This morning we learned what is our mission. Were y'all here? What is our mission? To point the sin-sick soul to Christ. Is that true? And if you're mean as a striped snake, does somebody want your religion? If you're plumb tired, can you think too good? And when Satan comes and dangles a temptation, is your processing speed working well? No. Sleep deprivation can negatively affect mood and temperament, as well as one's ability to focus on daily tasks. Lack of sleep influences what and how much one eats. We talked about that last night, how to lose weight. Sleep allows time for the mind and body to recover from the day's work. During the rapid eye movement, REM stage of sleep, the brain sorts the important information from the unimportant and files long-term memory. If this stage of sleep cycle is shortchanged, mental focus and acuity can decrease. Sleep deprivation has the propensity to make one feel cranky and short-tempered. Sleeping less than 7 hours a night is associated with weight gain, diabetes, high blood pressure, depression. We'll talk about this afternoon why it affects diabetes. Blood pressure, high blood pressure. We just talked about that with the American Heart Association. Depression, body aches, pains, reduced immune function, and impaired performance at work. When the body and mind are well rested, one is able to respond to life with greater perspective and understanding. This is interesting. This comes from science. Sleep can help boost one's motivation and willpower, making it easier to fend off what? Temptations. That's pretty cool. I look at 3 things for sleep. We talked about a little bit last night. How many hours of sleep are they getting? Mayo Clinic says don't get less than 8. Harvard's saying don't get less than 7.5, and they're flirting with 8. The Brezel-Belloc study, which studied 6,900 people for 15 years, found that less than 8 hours of sleep, you die quicker. More than 9 hours of sleep, you die quicker. The other thing is the brain. You have the glymphatic system we talked about last night. And if you need to be asleep by 9 o'clock for that glymphatic system to work and clean the brain. We also talked about going from non-REM to REM sleep. You need that contiguous sleep through the night. There's a number of things about sleep that we need to look at. Sleeping less than 7 hours a night is associated with weight gain. Wrong way. Well, what am I doing here? I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Well, I'm hitting the same button I was hitting. It's in a loop. Let's try this one. Nope. Let's go to the next slide. Keep going. There we go. Let's go back one. Back. Keep going back. 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 Keep going back. Back. There we go. Where's this? What's the setting for this? Are you a teacher? What's the setting? It's a schoolhouse. It's a schoolhouse. Next. Every Florida school and administrative building will be required to display "In God We Trust," according to a bill passed by the Florida House on Wednesday. The bill states that the phrase must be displayed in a conspicuous place. Next. When Tennessee K through 12 public schools begin class next month, the national motto, "In God We Trust," will be required to be posted somewhere in their schools. When I go in the school system, I used to have to say to kids, "Pull out your money. What does every piece of money say on it?" Because I couldn't say this, but now I can. It's the law in Tennessee. It's right when you walk into the office. It's right there on the wall. "In God We Trust." Next. Arkansas schools to display "In God We Trust." Next. A new law in South Dakota now requires all public schools across the state to feature "In God We Trust" motto on display. Next. It's on our money, our bills. Next. It's on our currency. Next. It's on our police cars. Is it on your police cars over here? Next. This is one of my fire trucks. This is engine 17 too. It's on our fire trucks. Next, trust in God. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. Trust. Next, prayer will give the sick an abiding confidence, and many times, if their cases are borne to the great physician in humble trust, it will do more for them than all the drugs that can be administered. Next, and said. Next, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. Next, well, it missed one there. As we look at these laws of health, we look at function of the brain. But why are we looking at function of the brain this morning? We're preparing for what? Battle. Again, Daniel 12:1 says it's going to be a time as never before. We ain't seen nothing yet. How strong is our no muscle in the brain? Did you know that when we fast, we build the no muscle? Every time you say no to food, you build your ability to say no. Is your body, your brain ready for those terrible, awful times to come? If it's not, we will be overcome. We got it good right now. Yes, the economy's having a little problem. But we have to prepare. Prepare now. Prepare your mind now. And let me finish with this. When I was a boy, and some of you that are here may understand this, my daddy would say, you go out to the field, you look at a tree across the pasture, you drop your plow, and you let your foot off the clutch, and you go. And you don't take your eye off that tree until you get to the other side of the field. Is that true? If I look back and say, well, how am I doing here? And then I'm just all over the place. We need to stay straight. And who's that tree? Jesus. Is it true? Jesus is that tree? If we trust in God. We've talked about a bunch of different, things like nutrition and exercise, which are all important. But the most important is, do you trust in God?